Right. Good morning. Good morning, all of you. who intuited, I'm glad you intuited the starting time. That's very good. There may be a few wandering in at the usual 9 o'clock time. For a moment, I had a lapse. Rarely happens, but what? Anyway, yes, last night I said 9 o'clock, and then I tried to correct, but the cat was out of the bag. But we have a lot to cover this morning because we want to wipe out all your glamours by noon. Oh, wait. 12, more like 12:30, I think. That's it, you see. And if all goes well, we're going to push the schedule back a little bit so we'll actually be able to do DK's wonderful formula for getting rid of individual glamour. But we'll talk more about that. Of course, we won't be qualified to do any of this work. If we're filled with glamour ourselves, we're not going to be qualified to help with the world glamour because we're part of the problem, right? So I'm going to accelerate certain things here, right? The first little meditation will just simply be an alignment. And then the only meditation that actually will occur right before lunch, okay? So this will just be to get us in line, and then we'll have a little introduction to the subject, a few things to say, and then we'll get right into the ray glamours, which can come from your soul ray, your personality ray, your mental ray, your emotional ray, even your physical ray. It can come from anywhere. And it's not an unserious subject, because the way it was described in the books is that both Alice Bailey and I, the Tibetan, have a horror of glamour. That's the word that was used. So it's quite a serious issue, and even though it's very elusive. So let's just have this time I'm going to not be so the long arm of the law. Thank you. Oh, wow, that's good. That was good. So we remind ourselves that we are the soul in incarnation. That's one of our identities at this present level of spirit immersion. We are the observer. If you trace it far enough back, the observer is the monad itself. And we are presently surrounded by fields, an etheric physical, an emotional, a lower mental field, and it doesn't stop there, of course. And we want to proceed with today's work as if the clarifying consciousness of the more liberated soul aspect of ourselves was able to see what's going on within the lower consciousness and the lower energy system. So we always want to hold the attitude of the observer detached from what may be occurring in the personality, and with a certain, as DK says, a certain don't care attitude. I don't care if it's good, I don't care if it's bad, I just want to see what it is. So a lot of self-observation and the observation of others will be needed if we are to be effective as trained observers. So we have that detached and clear point of view about ourselves in the personality sense, and about our interactions, and about the general field in which we are temporarily immersed. And with these thoughts in mind, we will just sound quietly an Om and move forward in our work. Good, and thank you. This is subtle work this morning. It's rather subtle, you know, and it's kind of like a crash course in a way, but you've thought about it a lot in your life, I'm sure, about the things that, your attitudes, your thoughts that are not really working for you, not really making you a more spiritual, effective person. I'm sure we've all thought about those things in our nature. And it's just trying to get a better handle on them. That's what we're trying to do now, because we have to clarify the consciousness before we can really see reality. That's the issue. So we'll start with a few thoughts from Livian Tuya, and then I'll add a couple of things, and then we'll get on with the glamours of the rays. And we have some quotes from the Tibetan which I think are very good. And maybe I make this just a little bigger, you know. I think it's too small right now. And, you know, the Tibetan sounds the note, and I think we need to listen to his words.
Mm-hmm. So this is a quote which gives an overview of what this is all about and what this new initiative is about. So the Tibetan says, the question arises as to what produces this glamour and illusion. The subject is so vast, embracing as it does the whole field of planetary history, that I can do little more than indicate some of the causes. Few of them have as yet been susceptible of correction, except in the case of individuals. This means that when individuals reach the point in evolution where they can identify themselves with their higher self, or their higher aspect, the soul, and can then bring in soul energy to offset, subdue, and dominate the lower forces of the personality, then correction becomes possible and inevitably takes place. And then this is the important part too. When, therefore, the time comes when a very large number of persons become aware of the condition of world glamour through discovering it and dealing with it in their own lives, then we shall have a group approach to the problem. Then we shall have a definite attack upon the world glamour. And when this does take place, speaking esoterically, an opening will be made which will admit the light of the solar orb. The fogs will slowly disappear, subdued by the solar radiance, and the pilgrims will then find the enlightened way, which leads from the heart of the fog, straight to the door of light.
Very beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's good when he sets the whole thing out, you know, like that. And then he also deals a little bit with illusion. You know, he says it's not really time for us to, Illusion is frequently misinterpreted and misapplied mental perception of truth. And it has not to do with the mental phase of glamour. It's not so much the emotional content of the illusion. When you bring your illusions down onto the astral plane and you get all excited about them, then you have glamour. He says illusions can be carried down into the world of feeling and become glamour. And when this happens, its potency is exceedingly great. So anyway, we're not at the stage yet where we can really do so much about it. But if you do want to join the Moria Federation, I assure you, you can be rid of your illusions by the end of 5 years. Very simple process, and Brett is involved with that, so just go talk to him. Well, you know, it's a difficult subject, and it's so difficult because you don't see it happening to you. Mm-hmm. You're so used to it that it's just the way I am, and you don't see the alternative until the present condition lifts or is broken. And then people are really shocked that they've been involved with the glamour, you know. DK says, some of you are almost flattered when you find you're up against the glamour. You know, I mean, even the glamorous approach to glamour, you know. So it is a world problem. Now, Tuya has here some things from DK.
Okay. When the Buddha was on earth and achieved illumination, he let in a flood of light upon the world problem through his enunciation of the Four Noble Truths. His body of disciples and his 900 arhats formulated those four great truths into a structure of dogma and doctrine that, by the power of collective thought, has greatly helped in the attack upon the world illusion. So let us remind us about the Four Noble Truths. And this comes from esoteric psychology. The Four Noble Truths. A. Existence in the phenomenal universe is inseparable from suffering and sorrow. B. The cause of suffering is desire for existence in the phenomenal universe. C. The cessation of suffering is attained by eradicating desire for phenomenal existence. D. The path to the cessation of suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, and of course we should study that. Today, the Christ is carrying forward the same great task, and in the spiritual significance of his imminent coming, and in the language of symbolism, he and his 9,000 arhats will strike a second blow at the world glamour. It is for this that we prepare. Only the intuition can dispel illusion, and hence the need of training in intuitives. Hence the service you can render to this general cause by offering yourself for this training. If you can overcome glamour in your own lives, and if you can, therefore, comprehend the nature of illusion, you will help in A. The destruction of the dweller on the threshold. B. The devitalizing of the general Maya. C. The dissipation of glamour. D. The dispelling of illusion. This you have to do in your own lives and in the group relation. Then your more general contribution will help in the wider human issues. The acuteness of the intellect and the illumination of the mind, plus love and intention will accomplish much. To this service, I reiterate my call. And I continue?
Just a little bit, yeah.
The time has not yet come for dealing with the world illusion on a large scale. For the race is not adequately mental, nor has the illusion, which is, as I have stated, preeminently the result of the misinterpretation of ideas, reached its height. But the hour has struck for the first step to be taken in the dissipation of glamour, and the hold of glamour upon the race should be appreciably lessened in the future. Hence, the practical training now being given in this group in their own lives, hence also the intended teaching later to be given to the group, if they measure up to the opportunity, which will enable them to aid in the correct concerted and planned attack upon the world glamour. Wrestle therefore with your personal problems along these lines, my brothers, for in this way you will gain facility in discernment, in clear, precise action, and in strengthened understanding.
Thank you. And of course, you know, let's just say that the glamour group was one of the ones that failed the most. And everyone in there had a really strong sixth ray. They were supposed to, because that tied them in with the astral plane. But they were overcome. And two of the disciples were seriously disorganized. Their etheric body was almost shattered by their love of the thought form of the Tibetan. There was this Tibetan thought form that was speaking, what did you call it? Good words of mediocre cheer. to you know, and it was saying all those lovely things that everybody wants to hear from the Tibetan, but it wasn't the Tibetan at all, and they completely were taken in by this, and they were just about shattered by it, and he had to do about a year of repair work for them. So this is, when you're getting into this subject, it's no easy thing, and until we actually deal with our own issues and somewhat begin to see them, we are like sitting ducks, you know. I mean, we work on world glamour, the next thing you know, we're completely overcome by some phase of glamour. So, and yet it must be done. And yet it must be done because he said the hour has struck. Now the big attack on world glamour, I think, will be under Vulcan, and I think Vulcan and Mercury and Venus, I think it'll come in a few centuries, just like humanity's really concerted attack against this. But the disciples have to really begin the whole thing now. And maybe the Christ himself will have appeared before that really big attack when you're standing in spiritual being together and addressing the world glamour. But we must begin now, obviously. Now, what I'm going to do is, I gathered just a few thoughts, just thinking about the subject, and I just want to make them big enough to see, and I'm just going to sort of mention them. These are kind of my own ideas about the subject, because I want to make it as clear as possible, because it's a murky subject. You know, he says the astral plane, as much as people may just think they love it, is just sort of a hissing mass of gray fog. You know, nothing is really clear. The astral serpent is deceiving everybody. So we don't want to fall into glorifying the astral plane. It's in a pretty messy condition at the moment. And the trouble with illusion, of course, is that people think they see perfectly clearly. It's just what they see is a distortion of what is. And in the world of glamour and the astral plane, you don't see much at all. And you get all excited about things that are completely erroneous and great exaggerations and great minimizations. And you just distort the whole field of reality. So we've got to get ourselves out of that. And so I just want to mention a few things before we get started with reading what the Tibetan said about the glamours of the rays, and just a few comments that we have in addition to them. And then we'll go through the first three rays. We'll take a break. We'll maybe take, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes on each one, just to get you familiar with it, okay? And then we'll take a little break, and then we'll go over the glamours of the rays of attributes, and then we'll have a chance. You have a handout, and Livy was suggesting that when you sense a glamour, you'd make a little tick. You know, if you sense that this might be part of your psyche. You just tick it off. And if you come up with a perfectly clean sheet, how did you do it, you know? Well, he said, you know, the nice thing he says about the second ray is they're pretty much subject to all the glamours. You know, nothing is specific, just the whole shooting match, the whole lot. Okay, so I'll just say a couple of things. The truly glamored person does not observe reality. There is a bias, a very incomplete point of view. I mean, you lean in one way or another. You know, Libra is the perfect sign for getting rid of all this. Like I said, was it perfect poise? What was the next one? Why am I forgetting it? The other was divine understanding. Perfect poise, a completed point of view. Perfect poise, a completed point of view, and divine understanding. You have those, there won't be glamour. Now, that's the Libra position, right? So for most of us, there's a bias. We prefer this, we prefer that. We exaggerate the importance of this or that, and we don't see things in proportion. When there's proportional vision, there's no glamour. But all of us are so skewed. You know, you see what happens to a stick when the water bends it, that kind of refraction. It looks like, you know, the stick seems to bend when it gets into the water. That's another little analogy of what happens when we want to observe what reality is, but we observe on the astral plane. So there's a bias, there's a very incomplete point of view, and there's a lack of understanding of true spiritual values. The true spiritual value of that which is registered. We don't see with spiritual discernment. We just see what we think we see. So all this is registered in the conscious, and we have wrong evaluation of what we see because of our emotional attachments to things, or because of our repulsions against things. I hate it so much, I love it so much that I don't see what it is. See, so if we're all excited about a thing, or we're just terribly negative about a thing, we don't see. So we have to have that detached and unbiased point of view. Like Roberto Assagioli would say, just look at yourself as if you were a scientist just studying some object, and you don't care what you see, you're just going to see what's there. Okay. Wrong identification, essentially, produces glamours. And who has right identification? I mean, a right identification is you know you are the spirit. Wrong identification is you think you're everything else. You know, you think you are this emotional body. You think you are the mind. You think you are the personality or the soul. You're not even that. You're something more. So eventually when the whole thing clears and you know you are the spirit, glamour and illusion will disappear. Glamour is always built, this is my idea anyway, glamour is always built upon a partial or non-proportional view. I mean, you know, when we have a completed point of view, no glamour. A partial or non-proportional view. The unimportant is exaggerated, and the important is minimized. So that's non-proportional. And you know, we just run with a great idea, and we're making a big deal out of nothing. We're making mountains out of molehills. We're making molehills out of real mountains. We've got to see things as they are. There must not be an emotional emphasis on the value of the part over the value of the whole if glamour is to be avoided. You know, most of us are so partial, you know, we got a lot of six rays still, we love this, but we don't love that, you know, and we just exaggerate our love of this instead of that. But if we stand back and see the true value of things proportional to each other, then we will not fall into those terrible exaggerations. You know, you've been in the old amusement parks, they used to have things called the fun house. Maybe this is from my era. In the fun house, you go in and there's all these mirrors that are bent in different ways. So your head may be about 4 feet tall and your feet will be this big. So you look very distorted, right? There you are, you're perfectly fine, and then you look at yourself in the funhouse mirror, and you really look strange. Okay, so that's what glamour is all about, see? It's just taking something that's in proportion and just making it ugly and out of proportion. Okay, attachment to the part rather than the whole is always a factor. The part is usually represented by the lower ego rather than the true soul identity. So the more we enter the world of the soul, which sees things in the large way, the less there will be this fixation upon this rigid identity we call the lower ego. It's always going to be a distorter. If you put reality through the lower ego, it's going to bend and skew, and it's not going to be what it is. Okay, anytime, I'm pretty much emphasizing the same points of view here. Anytime you emphasize the value of the part over the wider view of life and become emotionally invested in that part, you are dealing with glamour. You are a victim of a really incomplete point of view, and you are distorting your point of view through an overemphasis or underemphasis. Finally, we are here. I know what I was saying, having the refusal. Okay, let's say we have the refusal to see things as they are, and we're becoming emotionally invested in the distorted point of view to which we are attached. In other words, we begin to love our distortions. So first of all, we have to remove our distortions. And of course, in psychology, they say you have projections. These are things that are occurring inside you, but you think they're happening out there. So every person who wants to be deglamored has to remove their projections from other people and in other situations. You know, it's the black and white. The paper tiger, who's the real paper tiger, calls the real tiger a paper tiger. It's just a projection. So we have to pull back our internalizations that we have externalized on other people and see, my gosh, that really belongs to me. And DK tells us about this. He says everything you see in the other person is really in yourself, although it may not be there to the same extent. Oh, and the old saying, and when you point your finger, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. You know, so what's in me that I think is in the other person? This is a great cause of glamour. So with glamour, there's far from perfect poise. Okay, I've emphasized that. But it's really interesting. He says to produce harmlessness, what you really have to have is perfect poise, a complete point of view, and divine understanding. Harmlessness and glamour don't go together. And when we're really harmless, somehow the glamours disappear. So it's a very strict discipline, harmlessness. Who among us is totally successful? Some of the bad part of glamour, it deflects you away from alignment with the divine plan. When you're in a glamoured state, the divine plan from the atomic plane is trying to come through. New world, it's not going to happen because it's going to get all distorted and skewed, okay? Now, another thing I think, all of us are victims of lower egoism. We haven't gotten rid of our ego, you know. The lower ego is misidentification. It's the little thing you think you are when you're really something much more than that. So the element of egoism is always found where glamour is present. You'll see that as we begin to review them. There will always be a distorting self-referencing, whether positive or negative in character. You just can't get yourself out of the center of your field of consciousness. And you stand there as a great distorting factor, distorting reality, because you're always thinking about yourself. So, you know, what does he say about take your eyes off the little self? That's one of the big things, right? And when our eyes are truly off the little self, and that big, Master Mori, I often tell you about this. He says, he calls the ego a big ball of fat. I mean, he has various ways of impressing his thoughts upon us. So here's this big ball of fat in the middle of your field of consciousness, and it's got to shrink down, shrink until it becomes a vanishing point. No glamour, no illusion. But as long as you are smack in the middle of your field of consciousness, there's always going to be glamour and illusion. Okay. He really does say that. Okay. So the element of egoism is there. You know, oh, I'm nothing. Oh, I'm everything. It doesn't make any difference. You're still you. Forget the good self and the bad self, and only let Christ be seen. Right? Says the Tibetan. So I don't care if you feel bad about yourself or good about yourself. That little self is still your big preoccupation. Okay. The motives are of the beglamored person always somewhat self-referencing, and you're being limited by a personal point of view. You got to widen your point of view, and we don't see clearly. And you know, I did a little bit of repeating. I didn't refine this perfectly, but DK says that glamour will always appear whenever there is criticism, suspicion, or self-pity. Those are the three great seeds of glamour. And who of us is immune? Criticism, suspicion, or self-pity. Out of that, all kinds of things will grow. So, criticism devalues that which is criticized. Usually persons who definitely have their own value. So right away, there's no reality there. You're taking value away from the people who actually have value. You're not seeing clearly. Self-pity is overemphasizes the little self and prevents constructive, realistic engagement with the environment. Oh, me, I can't do that. Oh, no, But, your true value is not allowed to emerge because you just, pity is a puddle, you're just dissolving your true value into nothingness. Suspicion, again, does not see people the way they really are. It only sees others as they deviate from what the little personal self wants them to be or expects them to be. Thus, again, it's partial vision. Wherever there's partial vision, there's glamour. Remember the completed point of view. Okay. So, how little are we seeing? And how much exaggeration are we giving to things that don't deserve it? Okay, this is a little unpleasant, but glamours are like malignant tumors on the truth. They contribute to the creation of distorted points of view, and they do not promote the realization of truth in those whom they touch. So we have to get rid of all that. Look, if you have the perfect archetype, you don't have glamour. God starts with an archetype. The monad is an archetype. And if we bring that archetype all the way down, we have heaven on earth. But on the way, bad things happen. Funny thing happened on the way to the physical plane, okay? Things they gather, they accumulate, they get distorted, and pretty soon, when you look at conditions, you don't even recognize the archetype anymore. So we have to preserve the archetype. That's why sometimes maybe Uranus is really effective, because it gives you that lightning bolt, oh my God, that's what it really is. And then you look how it seems to be, and then you can do something about it. Okay, so just in general, if the personal is more important to you than the soul perspective, there will be glamour. It's based on personalism. And I've said this before, people point out a fault in you. We all love that, don't we? So someone tells you something about yourself, and you say, oh, well, look, that's just the way I am. Well, that's a perfect defense against a glamour that you have. You don't want to look at it. That's just the way I am. No, fifth ray objectivity is what's needed in dealing with glamour, and we're going to get into that little meditation about it. Okay, the dangerous thing is that people often feel so justified in their glamours. They think it's the best they can do, and thus the resistance. Germany was, Germany was glamour, Japan was Maya, Italy was illusion. And the self-justification of what was going on in Germany was incredible. It was almost impervious. This was a world thought about what had to be done to cleanse the world of all impurity, according to Hitler. And it feeds on itself. It just makes itself more and more virulent as the emotional investment grows in this distortion. The whole thing had to be shattered in order to actually see what it was. Well, okay. If we can find a point, if we can de-glamorize ourselves, we can actually help with the world situation. Otherwise, we're part of the problem. Are there any questions before we get into, yes?
Italy was illusion?
Now we're going to need a, I'll just repeat it, what?
Italy was illusion.
Oh, Italy was illusion, yes, Italy was illusion. The Maya. Well, he calls Maya, in one point, that unthinking emotional mess. Rather arresting words. Unthinking emotional mess, Maya. Running around doing but not knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, or for any purpose. Oh, it's just what I do, it's my habit. The habitual world is Maya. Italy had some grand ideas about restoring Rome. Okay. Maya. And he said by far the glamour was worst. Germany was the worst. Because after all, our astral body is the worst. in our whole planet. Our astral body is out of control. Our planetary logos hasn't controlled that. And in our solar system, our solar logos is still emotionally polarized. And we're trying to, you know, he's working on his cosmic mentality to become a third-degree cosmic initiate. Any other thoughts, questions? Because then we're going to get into what D.K. lists as the glamours. And he says, look, these are just a few. Their name is Legion. Legion means it's just like endless. And then he always works to find the specific way to describe the glamour that one of his disciples is subject to, because it's not easy. There's this peculiar individual variation related to the glamours. But at least we know the Hydra heads are 9. There's certain 7 deadly sins. There's certain glamours that the ray types fall into, and then you can work out your own adaptation of your own glamours that you may be involved in. But when you think you are something that you're not, this is the root of it all. It's egoism. If we could see spirit as the uniting factor in all things, and see all things as being and spirit, there would be no glamour, there would be no illusion. But we're all victims of mistaken identity. We think we are what we actually are not. And that's the root of the whole thing. And of course, the thing we think we are is some separate little thing. And it's separate from everything else. And it's just like, I use the analogy, the grasshopper has a compound eye. You know what it is? All those little, it doesn't have a round eye. It has a fragmented eye with all the little sort of polygons that are related to each other, but split, you know? And so you look out in the world, and how many images do you see? As many of those images as there are little fragments of the eye. That's illusion. See, if you have a nice round intuitive eye, you won't have illusion. And the roundest and most intuitive eye is the single eye in your head, and that'll take care of it. Okay? All right. All right, so why don't we get into Ray 1? Are there any people here who feel you have a lot of Ray 1 in your nature? Yeah. Or maybe, is there anybody here who would like to have a lot of Ray 1 in your nature? Okay, watch out. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go here to what's in black is from the Tibetan, and what's in red is what we thought about it. And there's more to be, of course, said. This is just a little launching point. Now, when we talk about this, take out your paper, and if you find that it resonates with you, just make a little tick. Try to, you know, and as you're doing this, and as you're listening to this, try to see yourself clearly. Does everybody have one of these pieces of paper? Is there anybody that does not have a handout? Okay, Heidi, can you help by getting some handouts to people that don't have them? Or now you will find that as the Tibetan lists these things, that there's commonalities between all of them. There's like a red thread running through these various things. So just think about yourself first. We're working on the individual level, and see whether, as we call these things to your attention, they may be infecting you.
So we go.
What dear? We're gonna do the what dear? Yeah, Ray 1. That's you. Yeah. Do you have? You're close to your. You have to be.
No, we have mics.
You've got to turn your.
Can you turn?
It's got to be green. Green is good.
And then once I see where, is it at the top? Okay.
Okay. On.
Right.
And we are going to just read.
We're just going to, just to settle these things. The Tibetan wrote in black. We thought about it in red. You can get our thoughts on it.
It means that's what Michael thoughts about it.
No, don't be so truthful, Tuya. See, she just broke up a little glamour here. You know, I was being a little overly inclusive, right?
Just general words about glamour. DK says about that only disciples can really effectively attack to glamour. So it means that we have to have some sense about the soul. What it means again that we have to have discrimination. What is the soul? What is the personality? And this is my own thought. So please study that in yourself. There are rays which are ready to act. And I think for those rays would be good to learn how to withdraw and stand for a while. But then there are rays which are naturally going and abstracting oneself. So I think that they should act and bring the intuition into the plane. Only for you to study that. Then one problem about the glamour is about that the glamour is not seen, only the effects are seen afterwards. That's why it's the problem. And because my interest is always about the Devic life and elemental, how things are built. So this is the problem because we are built from those substances. So every ray has a certain elemental structure. And this structure it's like that glamour. And that is our job, of course, when we incarnate, that to uplift that matter. So that's why if we learn this kind of like the doctor is studying the disease, the observer attitude, then we don't have so much emotionally based upon protectives in ourselves, that we try to protect that glamour. Because if we understand that that is our little cattle there that we try to cultivate, so then the life becomes very interesting, how we are able to map all of these glamours that we have. And in general sense, I think that when the first ray really gets going, the first ray is very effective in killing the glamours, because there is not this kind of attachment. All of those soft line rays have an attachment to those things, and that's why it's more difficult. Okay, so is the idea that I'm just reading this?
Yeah, we'll all focus on these things together, and people will just briefly think about whether it affects them.
Right. And maybe we can also think about, when we talk about first ray, about the labors of Hercules and Ares' labor, how Hercules is leaving his friend Abderis with too much load on him. And I think the one big problem for the first ray is that we tend to give the load away, and there is not clear understanding what the other substance can stand.
But that's what Moria said. He said, don't put the load of a camel on a donkey.
Right. So the first thing is the glamour of physical strength. Because it calls attention to the lower self and emphasizes the part over the whole. Something relatively non-essential is exaggerated in importance. The glamour of personal magnetism, calling attention to the one of the center. This exalts the little lower self. There is a self-centralization which ultimately means the welfare of the whole is not seen or ignored. The glamour of self-centeredness and personal potency. This naturally deflects from soul guidance. There is a sensitivity to potency, of course, but it should not be the potency of the personality. One exaggerates one's own importance in the larger field. The clamor of the one at the center. This militates against inclusiveness and unity. This prevents one from understanding the larger whole. The clamor of the clamor of selfish personal ambition. This emphasizes the one and the dominance of the one over others. One is blinded by one's own ambition and does see the true nature of the vital role which others play within the improvement of the whole.
And I'm sorry, does not see. One does not see. Yeah,
Okay.
I was my mistake.
Right. Does not see. The glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and of wide control. Again, overemphasis upon the center. Knowledge of the whole minimal. Admiration of self, thinking that only self can direct. I think that is true.
Oh, tick.
Taking away from the self-direction of others. When the one at the center becomes too big, it takes away from the potency of others. This type of clamor is really a form of a theft of vitality from others. The clamor of the Messiah complex in the field of politics. Again, the only one who can solve political problem, the one and the only above all others. It is untrue, false, that one can be an infallible savior of others. The value of others, people's ideas is ignored. I think when we compare this clamor of Messiah complex and the clamor of rulership, there is both of them, they are lack. The other one has like too big a view and clamored view about that, how it can be done. And the one has too little view that he is not listening the others. The clamor of selfish destiny, of the divine right of kings personally exacted. The one at the center is the only important one. There is no bigger picture. One is the king and others must obey the personal king. The king, however, obeys no one other than his own personal self. Thus there is a congestion of energy through vastly exaggerated self-importance. The field of consciousness has but one figure, which looms overly large, oneself. The clamor of destruction, enjoying destruction for the feeling of power which it brings, and not because of its usefulness to the divine plan. I am because I destroy. The purpose of destruction is now not adhered to faithfully.
Yeah, adhere to faithfully. In other words, the purpose is gone. I destroy because I like to destroy. It makes me feel great. And we forget entirely why we're destroying.
Right. Something about that in the terrorist movement, even though it is related very much to 6-ray, but also this kind of totally blind hatred to all kinds of, also form, but just to destruct. The clamor of his isolation, of aloneness, of aloofness. One's power and importance cannot be compromised by touching other people or letting them have any influence over oneself. One is perfectly well satisfied with the part which one is and ignores the whole, thus the distortion. The clamor of the superimposed will upon others and upon groups. It makes one feel more powerful and assures one of one's importance, one's irreplaceability. It does, however, rob people of their own will and thus prevents the greater purpose from being realized.
So let's just stop there for a moment. Does anybody recognize even the faintest presence?
Let me say one thing. When we are talking about this, they are how do you say, emphasize strongness, that the difficulty of the problem is that because we have all these subtleties, tiny little things in our psyche, which has its root very deep in us, and because all of us, when we read these, they are so obvious. But when we put this mixture of things, when we put these subtleties in those important moments where the decision can be made, the choice can be made, there we see our clamors, how we override the others. We have all kinds of ways. The first ray has this just override nicely even, maybe just said yes, 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 stop now. Or some people start to be weak. So it depends on what is our quality of the clamor, how we in those subtle ways act in the group field. Yes, dear, what you wanted to say.
Hey, I live with this, okay. Well, I was just asking, does anybody recognize themselves here? You know? And you know, you have to think about, we're not saying, oh, it comes from my soul, oh, it comes from my personality, wherever it comes. But where do you recognize, you see? Make note of where you recognize.
That's my wife.
Is she there? She left at the wrong time. Your chance is passed. Okay. So, okay, but you see, there's a red thread that runs through all these, isn't there? Mm. There's somehow the abuse of power. There's the abuse of will, and just thinking of yourself as better somehow than everybody else, and thereby taking away their will, thereby taking away the expression of the divine will, which depends upon the expression of the will factor in all the parts rather than just one. So it finally leads to totalitarianism. Mm. I'm so sorry. This is, no. Power off. Okay, sorry. Have to sometimes keep this on because, you know, strange communications come. So anyway, in the are you kidding? Okay. This is really a mistake. But he says, you know, in integration formula, that first-rate type, he's just killed everybody. And then he has to learn how to stand with his arms outstretched and the heart open and suffer and achieve sensitivity and include others. You know, so we can all see this is the abuse here. And it's very partial vision, isn't it? It can lead to megalomania. Mm. You know? Like Hitler was a megalomaniac, first-rate type. Napoleon had a lot of that. Wait a second, this cannot be. This cannot be. I turned myself off here, you know what I mean? Okay, it's going, it's going. I'm sorry, whoever you are. A first-rate type wouldn't say that. And Julius Caesar, you know, and then Louis the 14th, was it? Après-moi le déluge, you know. Was it 16th or 14th? 14th?
14th,
After
Sun
me,
King.
after me, the flood.
Yeah, Sun King, yeah.
You know what I mean? All will be annihilated after. See, it's just like you have this reflection around you of how wonderful you are and how necessary and indispensable you are, and everybody else, let other forms exist, I rule. That's the... Genghis Khan too. Yeah. I think he was that way. But you know, he really loved the law. This is the thing about him. As long as he didn't have to obey it. But he had a great sense of law. A lot of people just say, I am the law. You know, and a lot of those Roman emperors, they were that way. There was a lot of Leo in that kind of situation. So they were above God's law, and they were a law unto themselves. And I think we can see what it is, you know. But how do you get rid of it?
And you know, also when we think about how the glamour works, is that in the group sense, in our little groups at home, the family groups, and then the groups of friends, it is interesting to see how the glamours support themselves. So that the glamour of other one is supporting the glamour of the other one, that it is this kind of network. And that's why, because if we are not rising in our consciousness into the soul, that we really see that how it prevents the whole evolution, how it starts or tries to keep us all in one spot. Prefer to go backwards than not even staying in the present situation. So to attack that needs a real humility and also this kind of willingness and trust.
You know,
Because when you start to open that, when we go really, really into the glamour and the depths of them, we need trustworthy people around us to start to really attack to the glamours. And one thing what I wanted to add there, what I was thinking, there is in the first ray, there is this attitude to weakness. That when there is weakness, the first ray has the tendency to somehow hate the weakness. Second ray starts to, you know, nurture naturally, but the first ray wants to cut the weakness.
You know, what you said here, I want to just say to you, it's important, about humility. What we've tried to show is that a lack of proportion induces glamour. What is the definition of humility according to DK? An adjusted sense of right proportion. Thus, real humility is one of the great enemies of glamour. No matter, it doesn't have to be applied to the first rate type, to any type. Anybody who's sitting there in the center of your field of vision is not humble, because it's out of proportion. Now we're going to have to move forward. We just want you to just get the sense of what DK said, a few thoughts around it, and then later in the morning, we're going to have our small groups, and you can discuss your vulnerabilities in this regard and what you might want to do about it. So the next one, we're not going to worry about all this. This part comes from Esoteric Psychology 2, and he says in the beginning the first ray is like this, and later it gets better. You know, so this is just in a way a repetition of what we've already done. We don't have to worry about it. You're always selfish, you always misuse energy. It's always going to be glamorous in the beginning, and later it gets better. But now we go to the second ray, which affects many of us here, because we're gathered around a second ray master, and as a result of that, the reason we are thus gathered is because we're on the second ray in many respects. either in the soul or the monad. So let's see which of these may affect us at all. And I'm sure number one is going to nail about everybody. Okay, Livy's got to be on. Where's Bob? Livy's on?
No.
Oh, you're on. Oh, no, not now. No. It was there. It was there for a second. Is it just too low?
Now?
Yes,
Now.
there was a good one.
Okay, great. You know, I think that I love the example that Michael gave of looking at this as a scientist, looking at this in a detached manner, and looking at it as if we're someone else. Because we're so good at spotting glamours in someone else. So if we take this objective position of a scientist, I'm going to look at this lovely person, but it's someone else, then we can take that observer position much more easily, because the thing about glamours is they're so hard to see. So, and that's why we have these little sheets for us to, if you have a little twinge that, oh, this could be me, then you can look back later on and go into this more objectively, but with this sense of detachment and lack of personal energy involvement that distorts so much. So, the first one on Ray 2 is the glamour of the love of being loved. And hey, you know, we all like people to like us, but it's when it is carried to extreme, so much of an extreme that sometimes we will give up our values and not stand up for principles and things we believe in because we want people to like us. So this also turns the attention upon the astral body and our own feeling nature and prevents these higher values from emerging. Then the glamour of popularity. This is somewhat similar, isn't it? The attention of the world is again egotistically appropriated. The comfort part of the part is emphasized and not the welfare of the whole.
Yeah, it just exaggerates, doesn't it? Everybody loves you, adores you, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger in your field of consciousness. Pretty soon you take up the whole thing.
Right. The glamour of personal wisdom. And this is the idea, well, I know best. So not knowing the severe limitations of one's experience, one imagines that what one has gone through is sufficient to improve the lot of others. But this is such a partial experience. We don't have the whole vastness of the wisdom. So this idea, I know best.
But that's true.
The glamour of selfish responsibility. This is an interesting one because if we have second ray on the soul, we want to help people, we want to do things for others. But one emphasizes one's own importance in taking responsibilities in affairs which we should not be involved in. And so what does that do? That can take away the opportunity for learning for someone else, because we get in and we're going to fix it. We get in and we're going to take control of something. And instead of allowing people to take care of their own areas of responsibility. And again, it's egotistical to think we are at the center of all this. The glamour of too complete an understanding, which negates right action. So glamour is based on exaggeration or minimization or both. And one can allow their desire for complete understanding to expand We want the meticulous entirety of understanding, and we can become so overwhelmed with that and absorbed in that because that's what we enjoy doing, that we fail to take any action at all. And we miss this greater opportunity. And again, it's all about us. It's not about helping or serving or the whole. The glamour of too complete an understanding, okay, which negates right action, we covered. Now this next one is a basic glamour of this ray. And I think, those who are involved in service can really get caught up in this. The glamour of self-pity. One is so focused on one's own nature that the sentient faculties, which should be directed outward towards sensing the condition of others, is constantly directed towards oneself and one's own inadequacy in the face of circumstances. One commiserates with oneself instead of others. There's also this idea with self-pity that poor me, I have it so hard, poor me. We're focused on me, not really what's going on out in the outer world. The glamour of the Messiah complex in the world of religion and the world need. Again, self-importance shows itself, and attention is wrongly drawn to oneself and not to the whole, which one thinks one has the personal wisdom to manage. And again, we have this attitude. Can you see how important and wise I am? So the glamour of the Messiah complex. The glamour of fear based on undue sensitivity. One recoils from experience and is forced into an isolated condition, not daring to move out into life and experience. So with this, we have the love of comfort is one of the qualities that can be part of the second ray. And we can become so sensitive to outer things that we become afraid to do anything, which means that our value and usefulness is just so limited. So we all need some daring, to get beyond our comfort zone here. The glamour of self-sacrifice. One feels exalted within oneself for the apparent sacrifices one makes for wrong motive. And have you ever had this idea or heard someone, do you know what I do for you? Do you know what I do for the world? So wanting this attention and wanting the pat on the back. So the glamour of self-sacrifice. Also, rather than rise to the occasion, mobilizing oneself, one chooses the easy way of just giving up. It's too much. The glamour of selfish unselfishness. One expects a return in admiration for the sacrifices which one makes. So here we have entirely wrong motive, wanting the pat on the back, wanting recognition. The motive is entirely off. And it's focused on the little self. The glamour of self-satisfaction. This is an interesting one. One feels the completions of one's desires without realizing how little has been accomplished in terms of the whole. When I thought about that, I thought about kind of a funny example. I want to help someone, so let's say I give them a pair of special sandals that I like and enjoy. And I take pride in hunting around and finding that exact pair of sandals, and I give that to them. Okay, that sounds nice, but it could be winter, And they could have no winter clothes, and what they really need are a pair of winter boots. So do we really look at what is needed, or do we look at what we want to give that would make us happy? Again, it's this personal focus on supposedly doing unselfish things. It's really selfish. The glamour of self-satisfaction. One feels the completions of one's desire without, okay, we just read that, without realizing how little has been accomplished. Must be important because I read it twice. And then the glamour of selfish service. One apparently serves so that others will love and admire him or her. So we want the pat on the back. You know?
Yeah. So. Anybody recognize yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, these other ones are interesting, but maybe we don't have so much time. They're from esoteric psychology in the discussion of the blessed ones. But I think we get the idea. We'll talk. You know, if any one of these really grabs you, you'll have a chance to talk about it.
Right.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
And I'm just trying to keep to the schedule a little bit. And then, so many of us. I mean, who here feels you have somehow the second ray in your makeup somewhere? See what I mean? So, all right, somewhere, right? So unless all these rays are used really well, really perfectly, some of these foibles will be there. You know, I'll give you the shirt off my back as long as you love me forever. You know what I mean? But when a person gives you the shirt off their back and doesn't care whether you return anything just for the gesture, then you've done it right. But if you expect something in return for your sacrifices, we're caught up here. That's hard. Hard not to expect something back when you really offer something. But then, of course, you're really thinking of yourself and not the other one, see? So pure altruism will also defeat glamour. Humility and altruism. We begin to see things that humility and altruism, altrui, the other person, will defeat glamour.
Is there a sort of a range of intensity, for instance, when you have a friend?
Yeah.
And
She won't be heard. Anybody have a? Okay, we'll move right along. Okay. So a range of intensity. You say you have a friend.
In that particular, you have a friend who, you have a relationship with someone.
Yeah.
And you do this, they do that. Or you have a friend that you do this and you keep on doing this and you keep on doing that, but there's no
reciprocity.
It's almost like, is there a normal range where it might be expectations or demands, but is there a normal range in a relationship where there's a give and a take and a give and a take and some kind of rock and roll?
Well, give and take is good. And I think we're looking at an abuse where, see, wrong motive is involved here. I'm giving to you so that I can feel better about me and you will give me something back, me. As long as I'm focused on me, the glamour is going to be there. But in terms of working these out in a relationship, whatever works, a lot of arrangements are, nice, harmonious, cooperative, reciprocal, it's fine. Okay, let me talk about manipulation. I've always been accused, but of course I don't see it. Yeah, God. I just feel people are so unjust when they say this about me. It almost makes me feel bad. Right. And that would be like Ray 2 glamour, right? Okay, so anyway, Ray 3. And you'll see it. Well, the glamour of being busy. Look, one feels more alive when one is moving. more alive and important, I move, therefore I am, more important through ceaseless action, even if such action is not really needed to accomplish a task. You almost, to be still and know that I am God, almost don't want to know who you are, so you keep busy in order not to understand your own identity. It's not the same way. Look, Master Moria is said to have, this story impressed me. He ran into a room, took off a hat, put it on the table, picked up another hat, put it on, ran out of the room. Was he busy? Was he a victim of the glamour of being busy? Or did he have duties he had to perform under pressure? There's a difference. There's a difference between being busy and being hard-pressed, because you must be hard-pressed. But a lot of people just like to keep going because they don't want to be still and maybe experience the emptiness of their own life. So busyness covers up a lot of emptiness. And you know how it is with third-rate types? They may not be so good at self-reflection. So he says, that he talked to this, and Eleanor was here, I don't know, it was a third and sixth rate guy. He says, this is what makes you such a very poor psychologist. He was a combination of a third and sixth ray. He didn't have the introspection of the second and fourth ray. The glamour of cooperation with the plan in an individual and not a group way. Well, third ray always knows better, right? So one thinks one knows better and will not abandon one's chosen, apparently intelligent methods to work cooperatively with the group who knows a lot less than I do at accomplishing what must be accomplished. So, there's intelligence, but there's this kind of individualism. Now, all you have to do, another place to go look for glamours, is go into Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, and when he gives you those 10 pages on the rays and the ray vices, you will see right at the top the glamours. He doesn't call them glamours, he calls them deficiencies or whatever. Anyway, they're there. So you've got to learn how to be with the group and not stand apart in your own presumed intelligence that you know better, The know-it-all glamour is really a big third-rate thing, The glamour of active scheming. One plans far ahead for selfish advantage. It's like playing chess with life, so you always outmaneuver the other guy. One does this in a secret way, surreptitiously, so as to remain undetected while you pull all the strings, and then everything works out your own way, right? So, but nobody knows you're scheming actively. You just look like a nice person, and they fall into the trap. Oh my goodness, I know this too well. All right, here we go. I don't do this. No, I really don't. Not anymore. Okay, the glamour of creative... Excuse me. The glamour of creative work without true motive. The true motive will come from the soul, but look what I can throw together here, Thus, the lack of true alignment is suggested. The result is manipulation, coming from the promptings of the least real part of the individual, the personality. So the creative work, it's not truly representing the plan or any higher thing. It's all these combinations that in your busyness you can make happen. And a lot of them are really ugly. Some of the third ray art is just horrible. They throw together things that suit them not, They put people together at the same table that a seventh ray hostess would never put together at the table. They just throw things together. But they're creative because they're in motion and they're making new combinations, and it's not the real thing. It's not linked up. So I can do that. I can create that. But why? And what is my motive? And usually, often, to be adored in some way. Fourth ray has that too. Me they will love. Me they will adore. It's said in the fourth ray integration formula. The glamour of good intentions, which are basically selfish. With the third ray, there is often an ulterior motive, which has to do with its own plans and desires, and not with the welfare of those who are apparently being assisted. So DK says a lot of people get more out of serving others, apparently, than the other gets out of it. In other words, they go into the field of charity for all the acclaim they can get for the philanthropy, whether or not anybody's really helped by that or not. But they're known as a server, So they have good intentions, but they never step off the center of their own stage. One has one's own self-serving motive for apparently doing good things. And that's really subtle, you know. You do something in the outer world and people kind of see it looks good, but why did you do it? See, motive is always the question for the third-rate type, because you can make many things appear the way you want them to appear. Is it true? And whatever anybody else thinks, you know the reason you've done that. So maybe all of us having a third-rate personality on this planet, because this is the third-rate personality planet, we are all subject to this. The glamour of the spider at the center. That's a funny thing, you know. He says, it's a funny word, but spiders have 8 legs, right? And, you know, there's a centralization referring to one's complete adequacy in handling all things, whether or not it is for the welfare of the whole. In other words, and you're at the middle of your own web, too, and you're laying traps for others so that they become helpless and they fall under your power. You know, it's you lure them in and then they're gone, you see. So you can manipulate everything and you can handle everything. You know, you don't do that, let me do that. I'll take care of that, I'll take care of that. And pretty soon you've disempowered everybody. Your whole team is nothing but an appendage of you, and besides, you won't even let them do their work. You micromanage everything for the sake of efficiency, and they don't build their own abilities. The glamour of God in the machine. Where does he come up with this stuff? I don't know. It's sort of, this is a God in the machine, you know. This is an interesting title. It reminds me of God from the machine. God emerges from the machine. It's called, you know, I study opera, so it's called Deus Ex Machina. And in the old days when they had these operas about gods and goddesses, everybody would get in a terrible mess and nothing could be resolved. And then down would come the machine with the god, and the god would resolve everything on stage. So that is, again, you know it all, you can handle it all, you can tell everybody what to do, and the stage machine. And this is from Baroque opera, you know, it's really interesting. So it suggests, again, the ability to handle all things according to your own individual personal perspective and not the way they really should be handled for the welfare of all. So it takes away from other people. See, there's a lot of theft involved in all these glamours. You're taking something away from others all the time. And in this case, the ability for people to resolve their own issues. I'll do it. You know, first-rate, third-rate types. And, oh, here, let me help you. You know, and, oh, you want a drink of water? Have a bucket, you know. So it's not co-measured. And you're thinking of yourself all the time. This is one of the basic glamours. The glamour of devious and continuous manipulation. One wants all things to work out according to one's own plan, and one, unbeknownst to others, arranges all things so such a working out occurs. It's pulling strings. And DK talks about that all the time. Instead of just sitting still and letting things happen, you always make things happen. And he says you've got to stop making things happen and let them happen according to the plan and be the weaver behind the scenes according to the proper ray, according to the higher insight, and not always arranging, rearranging, and doing all that kind of stuff, which is a horrible, ugly mess. The sun shone in upon his woven carpet. Its ugliness was thus revealed. That's from the Law of Repulse. Okay, the glamour of self-importance from the standpoint of knowing and efficiency. Well, you know, he's theme and variations here. The idea of self-importance, self-centralization is important in all of these glamours. Count on me, I will arrange and solve all things, and I don't care if you develop your ability, I'll do it for you. I want this in my own hands. And I have 8 of them, if I'm the spider at the center. You know, like some of those gods, and their hands are everywhere. They're into, what is it, the finger in the pie glamour, you know? You are somehow in everything. You're meddling, you know. Let people be and do their own thing. So this can be the problem with the third ray. Anybody can relate, or am I the only one who refuses? Okay. Yeah, okay. You know, humanity is a victim of a lot of this, for sure. So, and then again, you know, look in esoteric psychology if you want to, for how these things work out in the beginning and at the end. And you can understand that every one of these glamours does not make life more beautiful or better or more aligned with the plan, does not help anybody, takes power away, steals, divides. It is not the archetype. It's not meant to be this way. It's just a distortion to make your own misapprehended identity feel better about itself. All of us are victims of mistaken identity. We all think we are something, and we're something much more than what we think we are, and we want to feel real good about this thing we think we are. And so hence our glamours come and make us feel better about what we mistakenly think we are. It's a big separativeness in identity. That's the root of the whole problem. Are there any questions before you have your well-deserved break? Okay, have a well-deserved break of about, 13 minutes.